Hello, we are going to talk about food chains today. So this next slide shows you a food web, which is a bunch of interconnected food chains. What I want you to see is that everything is connected by arrows. The arrows are actually representing energy flow. So now we're going to learn about all the different parts of the food chain. One thing before we do that, I want to point out that it is a cycle. We do recycle a lot of things, and we do lose a little bit as heat energy. So the first term, and this is at the bottom of the food chain, are the producers or the autotrophs. These are the ones that produce their own food through the process of photosynthesis. So examples would be the green plants, fruits, vegetables, trees, shrubbery, whatever you have that would go through photosynthesis. When we talk about photosynthesis a little later, we will also talk about this primary productivity. Pretty much primary productivity is the rate at which producers convert sunlight into usable organic matter. You can see on the left-hand side there's all of these biomes. We're going to learn about those biomes a little later. But what I want you to notice is the tropical rainforest and algae is going to be very effective at photosynthesis, making their own foods and so forth. The next term are heterotrophs. These have to consume food, so we call them consumers. And we could break the consumers down further into primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. So, for a primary consumer, these would be eating the producer level. Secondary consumers are those animals that eat the primary consumers. And if we had tertiary consumers, those would be the ones that would be eating the secondary consumers. Now everything dies, so we have decomposers and detrivores that are going to break down and use the dead plants and animals for food, kind of recycling the nutrients within the whole environment or ecosystem. So some examples would be animal scavengers, fungus, bacteria. This next slide actually shows you quite a bit of information. We talk about these different levels or trophic levels. We start off with the producers. I'm sorry I kind of went over that. I want to point out that this has the most energy. And if you remember from our lecture on organic compounds, that we eat carbohydrates to get the energy. Okay? Now, the primary consumers are going to eat the producers. So the energy is flowing towards the primary consumers. And you can see that we actually lose 0. So we only get about 1/10 of the energy. Now, the secondary consumers, okay, the frog here will eat the grasshoppers. Okay, so the energy flows from the grasshoppers to the frog. And then the tertiary consumer would be this hawk or falcon or whatever you have as that top level consumer. Now, as you go up the food chain, I want to point out that your energy does decrease. Pretty much you lose 0 at each level. So when we talked about organic compounds, we said you get your energy from eating carbs, not the proteins. And that is evident here with the energy units. So a food chain, is a pathway of food, and it's going to link energy, nutrients among the producers, consumers, or decomposers or detrivores. Now, I want to point out that it is a flow of energy, and that's what those arrows are going to be representing. So again, we have our producers here. All right, we have our primary consumers. Okay, the bird is a secondary consumer, and then this would be the tertiary consumer. Again, another example of a food chain. The arrows are representing energy flow. Again, another example. Okay. So each level or feeding level is called the trophic levels. Pretty much we're always going to have 3 to 4 levels, and that is because the energy does disappear. Okay, so each level, the producer level, the primary consumer, the secondary consumers would be a trophic level, the decomposers would be a trophic level. One thing to point out is only 10% of the energy at each trophic level is available to the next level. So if you remember, we did lose that 0. And a lot of it is used up in energy, heat, trying to get away from their predators, and so forth. Okay. Again, this is showing you the energy and how it decreases. It's called an energy pyramid. And the different trophic levels are listed here. And again, this one has 4 trophic levels. Okay. Another concept is that we know that every organism is made up of the same organic molecules. We learned carbs, lipids, proteins. We learned about the different elements that it all would have. So we can actually measure their weight and figure out how much energy they contain. And we're going to see this when we do the owl pellet dissection. So biomass will give an estimate of the weight of the population because it takes a census of the population and it multiplies it by the weight of an average individual in it. And you can see that the biomass period is the same general concept, except it is not as triangular. It's more blockish, but it's still, we decrease as we go up the food chain. Okay, this is just showing you again that it's more beneficial to get energy from the corn than it is to get energy from the cow. Again, protein, that wasn't one of the functions. Energy was not a function of eating protein. So we will be dissecting an owl pellet. We'll be getting to see all of these terms and talk about all of that. If you have any questions, please see me tomorrow. Thank you.